Hey guys, tonight we're slipping quietly into a world of flickering candles, questionable puddings, and the kind of family drama that would make even your weirdest uncle look boring. We're exploring the strange, hilarious, and sometimes slightly horrifying Christmas traditions that 1800s families actually followed. That's right, before Instagram trees and Mariah Carey, Christmas was less about perfect gifts and more about whether your pudding might explode, if Aunt Mildred was hiding a pickle in the tree, and how many ghosts were legally required to visit you on Christmas Eve. Before you get too comfortable, do me a favor and gently tap the like button, subscribe, and maybe even drop a comment about your weirdest family holiday memory, but only if you genuinely enjoy drifting off to sleep to this kind of nonsense. I read them all, even the ones that are just first. Now, dim your lights, switch on your fan for a little white noise, and wriggle down under the covers. Hide your toes just in case a Victorian ghost decides to tickle them. But really, have you ever wondered what Christmas was like before Wi-Fi, elf on the shelf, or pre-lit trees that self-destruct by New Year's? Did Victorians really tell ghost stories by the fire, or was that just Charles Dickens trying to make the holidays spooky? Why was everyone so obsessed with flaming desserts? How many oranges can you actually fit in a stocking? And what did you do if you got a lump of coal? Start a small business. Were Christmas crackers just an excuse to wear ridiculous paper hats? Or was there a deeper, darker British conspiracy afoot? Did people actually carol? Or did they just show up at your house demanding figgy pudding and refusing to leave? Well, good news. Congratulations. You've just woken up in a respectable, slightly drafty English home in the year 1857. It's Christmas Eve, and you're surrounded by relatives, clattering tea sets, and a strong possibility that someone is about to serve you boiled beef for breakfast. Welcome to the weird, wonderful world of 19th century Christmas. You settle into a creaky armchair by the fire, surrounded by relatives, and at least one dog of mysterious origin. Suddenly, Uncle Hubert dims the gas lamps and starts reciting a ghost story with all the dramatic flair of a man who once met Charles Dickens' cousin's dentist. It's tradition. Nothing says Merry Christmas in the 1800s like scaring each other half to death before bed. The room is thick with the scent of tangerines, scorched pudding, and whatever your cousin managed to spill onto the rug during dinner. All around, shadows dance on the wallpaper, warped by the flickering light of the fire and the barely contained chaos of Victorian wallpaper design. You pull a scratchy blanket over your knees, mostly for warmth, but also because stories like this are best absorbed when you're wrapped up like a startled burrito. Uncle Hubert's voice drops to a conspiratorial whisper, and instantly, everyone leans in. There's always at least one child who insists they're not scared. They are, of course, lying. Ghost stories at Christmas might seem strange now, but in the 1800s, it was the highlight of the evening. Like watching a horror movie with your family. Only you have to imagine the CGI, and your popcorn is actually boiled chestnuts. The tradition goes back centuries, when winter was the natural setting for tales about things that go bump in the night. The Victorians, being both sentimental and secretly obsessed with the supernatural, made Christmas Eve the official time for inviting every ghost, wraith, and unfinished business spirit into the parlor. If you were lucky, you got a dramatic reading of A Christmas Carol. If not, you got one of Uncle Hubert's originals, involving spectral pigs, haunted tea sets, or the mysterious case of the vengeful governess, with a passion for collecting lost mittens. You sit there, heart-thumping, as every creak of the floorboards and gust of wind outside the frosted windows adds to the suspense. Occasionally, the fire gives a pop, causing half the room to jump and Aunt Beatrice to drop her sherry. The dog, sensing opportunity, makes off with a sausage roll in the commotion. Outside, the wind rattles the panes, a perfectly timed special effect provided free by the universe. Every family has its favorite story. Some prefer the classics, featuring headless horsemen and spectral nuns gliding through abbey ruins. Others invent new horrors, the tale of the Christmas pudding that refused to be eaten and now haunts the pantry, or the ghost of the missing ham from 1847, which only appears when the larder is empty and the spirits are running high. The important thing isn't whether the tale is believable, it's about the delicious thrill of the unknown. the way your skin prickles at the possibility that, just maybe, there's something lurking in the corner of the room, behind Great Aunt Petunia's monstrous embroidery. As Uncle Hubert's story nears its climax, the room holds its collective breath. He describes a lonely Victorian child, lost in the snow, following ghostly lantern lights to a mysterious manor that only appears on Christmas Eve. The punchline, of course, is that the child survives and is welcomed in, because even Victorian ghost stories, despite their fondness for doom and gloom, usually end on a note of unlikely warmth. The point isn't to terrify, but to bond, to feel alive, together, in the safe glow of the hearth. When the story ends, there's a beat of silence, broken only by the sound of someone's stomach rumbling. There's always room for more pudding, fear or no fear. Then comes the chorus of opinions. That wasn't scary. Did that really happen, Uncle? What if the ghost comes back tonight? And, from the dog, a hopeful whine for another snack. The night winds down, but the effects of the story linger. You climb into bed, pulling the covers high, eyeing the dark corners of the room where shadows pile up like forgotten Christmas cards. Maybe you laugh about it. Maybe you lie awake, listening for footsteps on the landing, or the faint sound of a governess hunting for her mittens. Either way, you're part of the tradition now, a time when a good scare, wrapped in laughter and lamplight, brings everyone a little closer before Christmas morning breaks. That's the magic of the Christmas Eve ghost story hour. Equal parts fright and comfort, woven together with the threads of family, memory, and just enough absurdity to make the darkness outside feel like a story you'll all outgrow, at least until next year, when the tales return and the shadows begin to dance once more. It's dusk. You and your siblings are jockeying for the best spot on the mantelpiece, hoping your stocking won't catch fire from the fireplace. Stockings are patched, sagging, and smell vaguely of mothballs and ambition. Will Santa fill yours with fruit, nuts, or, gulp, an onion again? The stakes are high. This isn't the department store spectacle of matching, plush, monogrammed stockings. No, these are socks that have lived a little too long by the smell of things. You pick the one least likely to collapse under its own weight, only to realize it still bears the darning your grandmother stitched in 1842. The left foot sags ominously. There's a hole big enough for a walnut to escape, which might explain last year's mysterious squirrel incident. Everyone's got a strategy. The older siblings try to muscle their way to the center, where the fire's warmth supposedly brings Santa's attention. The youngest attempts cuteness, while you try to argue that proximity to the wall gives you extra luck, even though it mostly gives you extra soot. The whole affair is surprisingly political. Arguments break out about whose stocking was in the good spot last year, and why Cousin Alfred's stocking seems to get fatter gifts, even though he once tried to sell your marbles for half a jam tart. Parental intervention is inevitable. Someone delivers a stern lecture about the true meaning of Christmas, which, spoiler alert, does not involve shoving your brother into the coals so you can hang your stocking first. At last, the stockings are secured. Some dangle confidently, others droop like they're contemplating life choices. Each one is a tapestry of family history. Here a patch from an old school jumper, there a bit of lace your aunt donated after the Great Curtain catastrophe of '49. You're told not to peek, but everyone does. You try to act casual, nonchalant, but you're really just calculating the angle at which an orange would roll out, and whether you can catch it before the dog does. Once the dust settles, there's a certain reverence to the moment. The fire is banked low, flickering and casting long, wobbly shadows up the parlor walls. Stockings sway gently, looking like a parade of limp, hopeful ghosts. Somewhere, the faint scent of cinnamon and old pipe tobacco mixes with the aroma of burnt socks, a scent that, if bottled, would be called Victorian Christmas Eve. Eau de melancholy. The big question on everyone's mind is, what will you find in the morning? In the 1800s, Santa wasn't dropping off iPads or Bluetooth headphones. Your haul was determined by a complex calculus involving moral behavior, random chance, and whatever the greengrocer had left over. A good year means a crisp apple, a couple of walnuts, maybe a coin that's half melted because it was too close to the fire. A bad year? Well, there's always that one onion. Nobody knows who started the onion tradition, but everyone suspects great-grandpa Reginald, whose sense of humor was as sharp as the gifts he handed out. There's a kind of magic to the anticipation. If magic smells faintly of cabbage and old wool, everyone tries to predict what Santa will bring. The adults say, "It's the thought that counts," which is suspiciously what people say when you get socks, potatoes, or another inspirational pamphlet from the church. But deep down, you know everyone's hoping for a little surprise, something shiny or sweet, or, if dreams really do come true, a single, perfect orange. It's the holy grail of Christmas stocking loot. The orange is more than a fruit. It's a symbol of luxury, sunshine, and possibly scurvy prevention, depending on your luck with Victorian diets. When bedtime arrives, you take one last look at your stocking, hoping it holds strong through the night. You tiptoe upstairs, mind spinning with the possibilities. Will you finally get the good kind of nut, or will a carrot stub be your lot? In the end, hanging your stocking is less about what you get and more about the anxious hope, the ridiculous drama, and the unspoken competition that makes your family feel like a team. Well, a team with questionable hygiene, a shared fear of onions, and an unshakable belief in Christmas miracles. As you drift off to sleep, you imagine Santa, soot-streaked, overworked, and slightly deaf in one ear from too many years of parlor games, creeping in to fill those stockings. Maybe, just maybe, he'll leave something wonderful, or at the very least, a year without onions. Outside, it's freezing, but someone has to fetch the sacred Yule log. Tradition says it must burn all night, or disaster will strike. You're ankle-deep in mud, dragging in a log that weighs more than your Christmas spirit, just so your mother can mutter superstitions at it for good luck. This, of course, is no ordinary piece of wood. It must be enormous, big enough to burn for 12 straight hours, or at least long enough for everyone to forget about last year's tragic incident when the log fizzled out before dawn and Aunt Millicent blamed her unlucky turnip crop on you personally. Your breath comes out in little puffs of steam as you trudge across the yard, passing the skeletal remains of summer's laundry line and the icy scowl of the neighbor who claims you're stealing all the good logs. You try not to question the logic. Every family has their own system, but universally, the Yule log must be heavy, slightly damp, and located at the furthest possible point from the house. As you stagger back, trailing muddy footprints that will be held against you until Easter, the log gets heavier with every step. You briefly consider abandoning it and telling your family that bandits stole it, a plausible Victorian excuse for almost anything, but tradition, peer pressure, and the threat of supernatural misfortune keep you going. Plus, someone has to stop the youngest sibling from trying to substitute a broomstick for the Yule log. That's how kitchen fires start, and you'd like to make it to Christmas morning with all your eyebrows intact. Once indoors, the ceremonial drama begins. The log is examined by committee, meaning every relative with an opinion, which is all of them. Someone knocks on it to test soundness. Uncle Ernest sniffs it and announces it smells lucky. There's a quick argument about whether it should be seasoned wood or green, and someone inevitably brings up the family legend about the year a log full of beetles exploded in the fireplace, and everyone spent Christmas picking charred insects out of the pudding. At last, the log is settled into the grate with the solemnity of a royal coronation. This is the moment for ritual. Sprigs of holly or a dash of ale are sprinkled on top, and someone says a blessing that sounds suspiciously like a threat. You're meant to touch the log for luck, although mostly it just gets you splinters. Mother circles it with her hands, muttering half-remembered rhymes and warnings. May the flame burn bright, may our fortunes take flight, and may Cousin Reginald not break another chair this year. The first flames are coaxed to life with scraps of last week's newspaper, and the family's collective breath held tight. If it catches quickly, everyone cheers and claims credit for their personal contribution, whether it was carrying the log, arranging the kindling, or just supervising. If the log refuses to light, it's time for folk remedies. A sprinkle of salt, a desperate prayer, or the tried and true method of blaming someone for bad luck. As the flames finally take hold, the whole house relaxes a fraction, at least until someone realizes the chimney hasn't been swept since the last Yule log, and a fresh cloud of soot comes billowing into the parlor. For the rest of the night, the log becomes the star attraction. Its progress is monitored more closely than the family finances. Children are warned not to poke it. Adults are told not to fall asleep beside it, lest they snore so loud they wake the dead. The glow from the fireplace makes shadows dance across the ceiling, transforming the parlor into a world of gently shifting, comforting strangeness. There's a collective sense that, for once, you've kept disaster at bay, not through logic, but through centuries of stubborn superstition and the willingness to spend an entire afternoon ankle-deep in Victorian mud. Before bed, there's a final check. Is the log still burning? Will good fortune flow? No one really knows, but it's not about certainty. It's about hope, about finding a little light in the winter dark and pretending, if only for one cold, ridiculous night, that a half-burnt hunk of wood holds the power to keep your family safe and lucky for another year. And, if nothing else, you've now got an unbeatable excuse for muddy boots, splintered hands, and the faint aroma of wood smoke that will linger until New Year's, or at least until the next family argument about whose turn it is to clean the hearth. You wake to breath that fogs in the air and a bedroom so cold even your bedbugs are wearing mittens. It's Christmas morning in the 1800s. There's no central heating, just the hope that someone else braved the icy hallway to light the fire before your toes fall off. Your first conscious thought is simple survival. Should you attempt the treacherous journey from beneath your threadbare blanket to the frosted chamber pot, or wait and see if the cold will just freeze your bladder into submission? Your mattress is stuffed with lumpy straw, not comfort foam, and your pillow is little more than a sack of ancient feathers, some of which are poking out to jab you awake, just in case the icy draft wasn't motivating enough. Every inhale tastes like last night's candle wax, and the distant, hopeful scent of something baking, assuming anyone remembered to feed the oven wood. And not just superstitions. Before sunrise, you reach for your clothes, which you wisely slept in. The thought of changing into anything fresher is the stuff of Victorian horror tales. Your one set of winter garments, wool, scratchy, mysteriously damp in places, greets you with the comforting embrace of an unenthusiastic relative. There is no such thing as putting on warmth. There is only clinging to whatever scraps of insulation you can gather before making the sprint to the main room. Then comes the collective family moment. Everyone emerges from their respective freezing cocoons, teeth chattering, and hair standing up in directions previously only theorized by science. Siblings, cousins, and assorted house guests shuffle like sleep-deprived penguins toward the fire. In the hallway, frost blooms on the windowpanes in intricate, mocking patterns. Nature's version of seasonal decor, designed to remind you that, technically, you live inside an icebox. Every family has a system for determining who must risk frostbite to start the fire. Sometimes it's the youngest, sometimes the person with the most toes, or whoever lost last night's game of Snapdragon. If you're lucky, an early riser has already braved the elements, coaxing flames from reluctant coals and filling the parlor with enough heat to thaw at least your nose and possibly your will to live. If not, the morning becomes a scene from a survival documentary. Who will make it to the hearth first, and who will have to explain to mother why the curtains are on fire? As the fire finally crackles to life, you all gather around, toes dangerously close, hands held out, everyone pretending the faint warmth is actually doing something. Breath still puffs in ghostly clouds as you exhale. Someone jokes about roasting chestnuts. Someone else offers up their frozen socks instead. Meanwhile, the older relatives reminisce about real winters, which, according to them, involved icicles on the bedposts and snowdrifts so high you had to tunnel to breakfast. No one points out that most of these stories sound suspiciously like fever dreams. Eventually, your stomach growls, and the allure of breakfast outweighs the agony of movement. You trudge to the kitchen, feet numb, the floorboards ice cold and merciless as ever. Breakfast itself is a minimalist affair, likely porridge or bread, with a hopeful smear of something that might once have been butter. On rare and blessed years, there's ham or a slice of fruitcake, but more often it's the same daily fare, just served with a little extra frost. Yet, despite the misery, there's a kind of magic in the cold. Everyone huddles together, laughing at the absurdity, making deals over who gets the first turn by the stove, and plotting the day's gifts and games. Frosty windowpanes catch the pale morning sun, and, for a brief moment, the house glows with a soft, shimmering light that makes even the most skeptical relative admit that Christmas morning, for all its discomforts, is something special. After all, nothing bonds a family quite like the shared ordeal of nearly freezing to death before breakfast, and nothing makes that first, tentative sip of weak morning tea taste so much like victory. If your toes survive until noon, you've truly earned whatever orange or nut you find in your stocking, and the right to complain about the cold for the rest of the year. Forget pancakes. The traditional 1800s breakfast is a plate of beef boiled to the color of old wallpaper, served with potatoes that have seen better centuries. It's hearty, it's hot, and if you close your eyes, you can almost pretend it tastes like Christmas. You drag yourself into the kitchen, trailing a blanket and possibly some of your dignity. The room is steamy, not from luxury, but because every window is fogged by the boiling cauldron on the stove. The smell is distinctive, somewhere between public bathhouse and wet wool left in the sun, with just a hint of beef. The meat, in all its pallid glory, has been simmering for hours. It sits in a dish of limp surrender, ready to meet your half-awake taste buds. Everyone gathers round, plates in hand, eyes bright with hope, or at least resignation. No one is here for the culinary adventure. They're here because it's warm, and the food is technically edible. The potatoes, looking like survivors of several bad harvests, are spooned onto each plate, followed by slices of beef so tender they could be mistaken for damp parchment. Your mother, keeper of tradition and strong opinions, swears by the restorative powers of this meal. It puts hair on your chest, she insists, eyeing you and your siblings with a look that suggests she's not entirely joking. You watch as Uncle Alfred douses his beef in mustard, probably hoping to revive some hint of flavor. Your little sister tries to hide her potatoes under a napkin, while your father launches into a monologue about how, during his childhood, breakfast was simply whatever you could find that wasn't nailed down or crawling away. The table is a cacophony of clinking cutlery, polite chewing, and someone quietly weeping at the sight of boiled root vegetables. But there's a rhythm to it, a choreography perfected over many a cold winter morning. The youngest try to negotiate for smaller portions. The elders make passive-aggressive comments about the good old days, and the dog lurks under the table, ready to pounce on anything that hits the floor. You're pretty sure the dog is hoping for an accident involving the beef, but seems just as happy with a stray potato. There's no coffee, just weak, milky tea, and the occasional mug of cocoa that tastes mostly of regret. Bread, if present, is crusty, thick, and best used for either eating or shoring up the family cottage against the next gale. Still, the meal is filling in a way only 19th century British food can be. It sits in your stomach like an anchor, fueling you for a day of strenuous relaxation, social obligation, and, inevitably, more eating. Yet, there's something oddly comforting about it. The steam from the beef fills the room and fogs your glasses if you're lucky enough to own any. The warmth seeps into your bones, chasing away the morning chill and thawing out the worst of your complaints. The conversation turns to the rest of the day, who will help with the pudding, who will set the table for dinner, and whether anyone will ever recover from the trauma of this much boiled protein before noon. You find yourself oddly grateful for the blandness. There are no surprises, no sudden explosions of flavor, just the reassuring monotony of tradition. Even the smallest act, passing the salt, buttering a hunk of bread, feels steeped in ritual. You could almost convince yourself it's not so bad, as long as you don't look too closely at what's actually on your fork. And as the plates empty, the chatter grows louder. Someone cracks a joke about boiled beef being the real reason Victorians invented Christmas crackers. Laughter bounces off the frost-rimmed windows, and you realize that, for all its shortcomings, this breakfast is doing exactly what it's meant to, warming the family filling bellies, and giving everyone another story to share when breakfast finally rolls around next Christmas. Because in the 1800s, nothing says festive like surviving another helping of potatoes and mystery meat together. Time to line up for the annual family portrait, which requires everyone, including the baby and the family goose, to remain perfectly still for what feels like half your natural lifespan. Blinking is forbidden. Smiling is suspicious. The very mention of Christmas portrait sends a ripple of dread through the house. Suddenly, everyone is much busier than usual. Someone volunteers to go chop more firewood for 3 hours. Someone else offers to start hand-washing every sock in the house. But resistance is futile. The portrait must be taken. You're herded toward the one patch of wallpaper that hasn't peeled, wearing your best clothes, which are mostly just your everyday clothes with the less visible stains facing outward. Mother adjusts your hair with a combination of spit and sheer willpower. Your brother attempts to negotiate a position as far away from Aunt Millicent as possible, while the baby, sensing doom, has already started to squirm. The photographer, who travels from house to house with a camera that weighs as much as the Yule log, is a figure of mystery and terror. He arrives with an armful of ominous equipment, a collection of cloths and wooden tripods, and the faint air of someone who has seen things. He instructs everyone to assume the pose, back straight, hands visible, eyes forward, no fidgeting, no whispering, definitely no smiling. If you must blink, do so before the exposure, which, you're warned, will last anywhere from 1 minute to the entire reign of Queen Victoria. The next 10 minutes are a study in endurance and self-control. Your uncle tries to stifle a sneeze. The goose, inexplicably included for posterity, lets out a low, menacing honk. Someone's knee begins to itch, which means every other knee in the room is now also itching, in sympathy. The baby is passed from lap to lap like a ticking bomb. Will it cry, drool, or do something even more memorable? Nobody knows, but everyone is gambling. Meanwhile, the photographer launches into his speech on the virtues of not moving. Immobility is the secret to posterity, he says, as if that's comforting. Smiling will only confuse future generations. He disappears under a thick black cloth, emerges to scowl at the group, and vanishes again. The room fills with the scent of mothballs, boiled beef, and rising panic. You count the seconds by the slow drip of wax from the candelabra, and try not to think about the time Cousin Alfred sneezed, and the portrait came out looking like a haunted potato. As the exposure finally begins, time slows to a crawl. You try to think of anything except blinking, your favorite book, the Christmas pudding, the fact that your feet are slowly turning to stone. The photographer's voice drones on in the background. Nobody moves steady almost there. Every muscle in your body is locked. You've never been this focused, not even during last year's family game of Snapdragon. The baby emits a suspicious gurgle. The goose's eyes glitter with mischief. At last, the ordeal ends. The photographer removes the plate, sighs in relief, and promises to send a print in 3 to 6 months, depending on weather, road conditions, and acts of God. You stagger away from the scene, limbs stiff, eyes watering, feeling oddly accomplished and vaguely traumatized. The baby erupts in a celebratory wail. The goose pecks someone's boot in protest. Someone, always, manages to knock over the backdrop. Later, as you thaw out with a cup of weak tea, you realize the portrait isn't really about capturing joy. It's about surviving as a unit, frozen in time, blinking back tears, and secretly plotting your revenge on whoever decided the goose was part of the family. It's a testament to endurance, patience, and the power of collective suffering. A gift you'll treasure every time you see that faded photograph hanging askew on the parlor wall, haunted expressions and all. And years from now, when someone asks why no one in old family photos ever smiled, you'll know the truth. Smiling was not just discouraged, it was physically impossible. The real Christmas miracle was making it through the portrait alive, only marginally traumatized, and with all your relatives still speaking to each other. Now comes the highlight. Christmas pudding. This isn't dessert, it's an event, made weeks in advance, boiled for hours, and set on fire before serving. The pudding is basically a culinary dare. One silver coin hidden inside promises good luck, unless you break a tooth on it. The Christmas pudding holds a power in the household that borders on myth. From the moment Advent begins, hints of its existence permeate every conversation. Will this year's pudding be better than last? Will Aunt Eliza remember to soak the fruit instead of herself? Will the coin go to someone deserving, or just to the family member with the most dental work? The anticipation is palpable. The pudding, dark and dense, is prepared weeks in advance in a process that resembles both baking and an elaborate group spell. Every member of the family is called in to stir the bowl for luck, reciting the same lines year after year, as if proper incantation might prevent the thing from collapsing under its own weight. When the day finally arrives, the pudding is boiled for hours in a muslin shroud that gives it the look of a forbidden artifact. The kitchen is transformed into a makeshift steam room, fogging every window and every pair of spectacles. The aroma, part citrus, part brandy, part mysterious Victorian spice, clings to the walls for the rest of winter. And while the pudding steams, every stomach in the house tightens with a mixture of hope and mild dread. This is not a light dessert. This is the kind of dish that doubles as a paperweight, a doorstop, or, in lean years, a blunt instrument. At last, the pudding emerges, triumphantly, as the centerpiece of the meal. It is presented to the family with all the ceremony of a royal visit. The house quiets, the dog whimpers. Uncle Bernard solemnly produces the silver coin, an artifact with the bite marks of generations, and discreetly shoves it into the side of the pudding when he thinks no one's looking. Meanwhile, someone's already warming the brandy, ready for the pièce de résistance, the lighting. There is only one way to serve a Christmas pudding, in flames. The lights are dimmed, and the room collectively inhales as the pudding is doused in liquor and set alight. Blue flames dance atop the glossy dome, casting ghostly shadows and threatening to ignite the curtains. For a few seconds, the pudding looks almost magical, until someone coughs and the spell is broken. If all goes well, only the top is singed. If not, you'll be scraping burnt fruit off the platter for weeks. Serving is an ordeal in itself. The pudding, having absorbed its own weight in brandy, resists the knife with stubborn determination. Slices are dealt out with the gravity of a high-stakes card game. Eyes narrow as each person examines their plate, poking gingerly for the hidden treasure. The silver coin, now mostly black, occasionally sticky, is the object of every fork's affection. Finding it means luck for the coming year, or at least a good story for the dentist. The taste? Well, it's distinctive. Rich, fruity, vaguely alcoholic, and with a texture that hovers somewhere between moist and prehistoric. You chew thoughtfully, pretending to enjoy every bite while secretly hoping you don't crack a molar. The adults insist it's an acquired taste. The children, meanwhile, plot ways to slip theirs to the dog, who, judging by past experience, will regret nothing. After the last bite is forced down, conversation turns to past puddings. The year someone swallowed the coin, the time the pudding caught fire, and so did Uncle Bernard's moustache, the infamous raisin shortage of 52. These stories, retold every year, are the real dessert, a reminder that, for all its hazards, the Christmas pudding is more than a food. It's a living record of family lore, chaos, and resilience. So you lean back in your chair, full to bursting, slightly singed, maybe a coin richer, definitely a story heavier. The sacred ritual of Christmas pudding is complete, a testament to tradition, tenacity, and the surprising number of things Victorians were willing to set on fire in the name of festive cheer. Who needs cereal when you have plum porridge that's been reheated every morning since Advent? And don't forget mince pies, a mixture of dried fruit, suet, and Victorian optimism, designed to put hair on your chest, regardless of age or gender. You roll out of bed, still shivering from a night spent battling frost and bedbugs, and stumble into the kitchen, following the unmistakable scent of something vaguely fruity. There, on the stove, is the legendary cauldron, the plum porridge. It's been bubbling away since the start of the month, sometimes topped up with new ingredients, sometimes just topped up with more hope. This porridge is less a recipe and more a living ecosystem, layers of oats, plums, and the ghosts of breakfasts past. Each morning, it gets thicker, darker, and a little more mysterious. The surface trembles, as if daring you to ask what's actually in it. You're handed a bowl, which is less an act of hospitality and more of a challenge. The first spoonful is always the hardest. The flavor is bold, sweet, certainly, but also tart, sticky, and with a texture that could best be described as fortifying. You chew, swallow, and brace yourself for the possibility of encountering something unexpected, a rogue currant, a suspiciously crunchy oat, or, if you're really lucky, a clove you'll be tasting until Boxing Day. No one complains, at least not out loud. Complaining just means someone will ladle out another helping, convinced that what you really need is more plum porridge to keep you going. Just as you're considering hiding the rest of your breakfast under the table, in comes the second course, mince pies. But not the modern flaky kind. These are sturdy, rustic pastries, stuffed with a filling so dense it could double as a doorstop. The Victorians took their mince pies seriously. Each one is loaded with dried fruit, suet, candied peel, spices, and, if the family budget allowed, a dash of brandy, sherry, or whatever mysterious bottle was lurking in the back of the cupboard. Every bite is a sensory journey, sweet and savory, rich and robust, and always just a bit heavy on the nutmeg. The pies are stacked on a plate in the center of the table, and grabbing one becomes a competition of reflexes. If you wait too long, you'll get the one that's slightly burnt. Wait too little, and you risk a pie so fresh from the oven, it could be used as a hand warmer. Tradition demands that everyone eat at least one, for luck. You're not sure what kind of luck is involved, possibly the luck of not needing dental work afterward, but you comply, because tradition is tradition, and because your mother is watching. The family exchanges stories as you eat. Someone brings up the year when grandfather accidentally dropped his false teeth into the porridge, and no one noticed for a week. Someone else retells the story of the Great Suet disaster, when the mince pie filling was replaced with turnip by a well-meaning but colorblind cousin. Laughter mingles with the sound of scraping spoons and the groans of already full stomachs. Despite the strange flavors and the potential for porridge-induced dental trauma, there's something undeniably comforting about the ritual. Maybe it's the heat of the food in the chilly parlor, or the way everyone rallies around to share jokes, gossip, and slightly traumatic pie stories. Maybe it's just knowing that, come what may, the breakfast table is a place of camaraderie, chaos, and the kind of endurance that defines a true Christmas survivor. As the last spoonful disappears, you lean back, feeling slightly heroic. You've braved the porridge, conquered the mince pies, and lived to tell the tale. Outside, the world is cold and grey, but inside, you're warmed by tradition, laughter, and the bizarrely satisfying certainty that, for one more morning, you've eaten like a true Victorian, facing adversity with a spoon and a sense of humor. The doorbell rings, except it's just someone banging a stick. A gang of carolers have arrived, belting out "God Rest Ye Merry," "Gentlemen Off Key," and loudly demanding figgy pudding. You smile, you clap, you consider bribing them to leave. The Victorian Christmas carolers are not the perfectly harmonized choir you might imagine. No, these are your neighbors, friends, and possibly a few complete strangers who heard there was free food involved. They travel in packs, wrapped in mismatched scarves, cheeks red from the cold, and perhaps from the festive cider that's been circulating since noon. Their songbooks are mostly for show. Everyone sings whatever lyrics they remember, usually in a key not found in any known hymnal. As the singing begins, you find yourself wondering how many verses the 12 Days of Christmas actually has. The answer, all of them, twice. Each caroler brings their own vocal style, ranging from enthusiastic to bewildered, with the occasional lone soprano breaking into Silent Night, just as everyone else launches into Deck the Halls. It's more musical chaos than concert, and you're left hoping the neighbors don't call the local constable to complain again. Victorian etiquette requires you to open the door, smile politely, and offer some form of refreshment. It's part of the unspoken contract between caroler and carolee. They serenade you with noise, and you, in return, provide sustenance, applause, or at the very least, a place to warm up for a minute. You pass out plates of mince pies, mugs of weak punch, and, if you're feeling generous, slices of the infamous Christmas pudding. You try not to notice when someone pockets 3 extra ginger biscuits for the road, but the carolers are not easily appeased. Their demands for figgy pudding grow louder, more insistent. You have no idea what figgy pudding actually is, no one does, but the threat of them singing a third encore is very real. You search the pantry for anything vaguely fig-like, or at least something sticky enough to pass for pudding in the candlelight. At this point, you briefly consider inventing a new Christmas tradition. Silent Night, enforced by a stern note pinned to the door. Inside, your own family peeks out from behind the curtains, equal parts entertained and alarmed. The younger children beg to join the carolers, convinced that this is the only way to guarantee more dessert. The dog, overwhelmed by the chorus of unfamiliar voices, howls in harmony, a solo so moving that even the carolers pause to admire it. Your father tries to offer constructive criticism, but no one listens, and the singing continues with renewed vigor. Between verses, the carolers exchange local gossip and news, using their rounds as the Victorian version of social media. Who's engaged? Who's expecting? Whose goose met an untimely fate in the pond last week? All becomes fair game. Every doorstep becomes an unofficial town square, where secrets are swapped along with biscuits. It's festive, yes, but also slightly perilous for those with anything to hide. Eventually, as your supply of snacks runs perilously low, you attempt the delicate art of sending the carolers on their way. You clap, you thank them for their beautiful performance, and you try not to sound too desperate as you suggest that Mrs. Hargreaves down the road probably has fresh tarts cooling on her windowsill. The carolers depart, feet stomping, voices fading into the frosty night, ready to serenade the next unsuspecting household. As you close the door, you're left with a muddle of emotions, relief, amusement, and a ringing in your ears that will last until New Year's. You rescue the last mince pie from the dog and gather your family around the fire, swapping stories of legendary caroling encounters from years past. The time someone accidentally sang at the vicarage dressed as a cow, or when Great-Aunt Tilda started a conga line in the snow. Because in the end, carolers are less about music and more about connection. The awkward, noisy, delightfully human kind. They remind you that, even in the coldest winter, a little chaos at your doorstep is just another way to feel part of something bigger. And if it means risking an encore or two, well, at least you'll always have a story to tell the next time someone starts humming God Rest Ye Merry, Gentlemen. The Christmas tree stands in the parlor, decked out with homemade ornaments, precarious candles, and... wait, is that a glass pickle? Tradition says whoever finds it gets an extra present. The real prize is not burning the house down. Tree decorating in the 1800s is an adventure in risk management and creative compromise. First, there's the tree itself, lopsided, shedding, and only slightly taller than your youngest cousin. It's hauled in from the garden, or, for the truly unlucky, dragged home from a neighbor's fence after dark, and wedged into a pot filled with rocks, hopes, and last year's dirt. There's no plastic stand. There's just the daily fear it will tip over during a particularly spirited round of Good King Wenceslas. Once the tree is standing, the real fun begins. Every ornament is a testament to Victorian thrift. Oranges studded with cloves hang next to paper snowflakes, strings of popcorn, and faded fabric stars made from the remnants of Aunt Edna's wedding dress. No two ornaments match, and each one has a backstory, usually involving glue mishaps or a near miss with the family cat. There are a few delicate glass baubles, all carefully placed as high as possible to prevent dog, toddler, or gravity-related accidents. Then there are the candles. Yes, real candles. Open flames balanced on tree branches, because nothing says festive like lighting 15 miniature torches in a room lined with wallpaper, lace curtains, and exactly 0 fire extinguishers. The lighting of the candles is treated with a reverence usually reserved for coronations and open-heart surgery. The entire family gathers, holding their breath and buckets of water, as each wick is lit. The effect is magical for the first 30 seconds, after which everyone just watches nervously, waiting for a spark to leap onto something irreplaceable. And finally, the mysterious pickle. Somewhere in the green chaos hangs a glass pickle, the origins of which are a matter of heated family debate. Some say it's a German tradition, others claim it was invented by the Victorians as a prank, and a few believe it simply materialized one year, as all the best holiday legends do. The pickle is tucked deep into the boughs, camouflaged among paper chains and hopeful pine needles. The annual search for the pickle is a ritual of chaos. Siblings push, parents referee, and the dog offers moral support by eating any fallen tinsel. Whoever finds the pickle is declared the winner of what, exactly, no one's sure. An extra gift? First slice of cake? Eternal bragging rights? All are possible, but the true reward is being the only one allowed to take the best present from the mystery sack, which usually contains a wind-up toy, a bag of marbles, or something hand-knitted with too many sleeves. The competition is fierce. Reputations are made and destroyed beneath the blinking gaze of glass ornaments and the ever-present threat of singed eyebrows. But the real goal isn't about prizes or even the pickle itself. It's about the ritual, the shared laughter, the frantic searching, the inevitable argument over whether that's a real pickle or just an oddly shaped green ornament. Every year, the tree becomes a living scrapbook of family chaos and creativity, draped in memories as much as tinsel. By the end of the evening, you're left with a parlor filled with pine needles, melted candle stubs, and a tree that survived another year of Victorian ingenuity. The glass pickle is re-hidden for next Christmas, ready to be discovered all over again. And as you step back and admire the glittering, slightly smoky masterpiece, you realize the greatest gift is simply not having to call the fire brigade. At least, not until New Year's. Clusters of mistletoe hang from every doorway, turning the house into a minefield of awkward kisses and nervous laughter. Avoiding your aunt's attempts at matchmaking becomes an extreme sport. Victorian Christmas wasn't just about pudding, pickles, and the persistent risk of catching fire. It was also, thanks to mistletoe, an annual test of social boundaries and creative evasive maneuvers. By early December, every entrance in the house is adorned with thick bundles of the stuff, hung with an optimism usually reserved for national lottery tickets. The explanation is always the same. It's for tradition. The real reason? To orchestrate the kind of holiday drama that can only be resolved through years of polite denial. You learn to move through your own home like a seasoned burglar, ducking through doorways, hugging the skirting boards, and keeping one eye on Cousin Edwin, who's lurking with intent and a suspiciously shiny comb. Some relatives treat the mistletoe as a strategic asset. Your aunt, self-appointed Cupid of the family, lurks nearby, ready to shove unsuspecting singles together with all the subtlety of a Victorian cattle prod. It's a minefield of orchestrated accidents. Suddenly, the shyest cousin and the most eligible guest are both reaching for the same tray of mince pies, right beneath the largest, most strategically placed mistletoe bouquet in England. The rules, naturally, are flexible and enforced only when convenient. Kissing under the mistletoe is said to bring good luck for the coming year, or at least guarantee that you'll be the talk of every family gathering until Easter. Sometimes it's just a quick peck on the cheek. Sometimes it's an embarrassing moment, immortalized by a chorus of giggles, coughs, and your grandmother fanning herself with the Christmas issue of the Times. It's not uncommon for the family dog to wander through, get caught up in the festivities, and receive more kisses than anyone else, all in the name of seasonal goodwill. In the midst of all this, you discover the true challenge isn't so much romantic intrigue as it is navigation. Every route from parlor to kitchen becomes a maze, mapped out in your mind to avoid unwanted encounters and the ever-present threat of Uncle Horace, who's known for planting wet, whiskery kisses on every available cheek, human or otherwise. Some guests, more determined or more mischievous, make a game of catching the unwary, lurking in doorways or popping out from behind curtains like mistletoe-themed goblins. The drama escalates as the evening goes on. The punch bowl empties, inhibitions loosen, and the number of surprise kisses rises steadily. Soon, You're witnessing impromptu proposals, embarrassed refusals, and at least one attempt to kiss the family portrait for luck. Small children, sensing opportunity, collect extra sweets from distracted adults by threatening to report who's kissing whom, wielding their power like tiny Victorian blackmailers. Through it all, the mistletoe dangles overhead, witness to every laugh, blush, and strategically avoided eye contact. The awkwardness is palpable, but so is the warmth. In some strange way, this absurd, slightly invasive ritual brings everyone closer, not just in proximity, but in spirit. Old grudges are set aside for the night, new stories are created, and for a brief, ridiculous moment, the cold Victorian world feels full of life, possibility, and the faint taste of brandy on someone else's breath. At the end of the night, as you sneak off to bed, you can still hear the giggles and gentle ribbing echoing down the hallway. You check the doorframe one last time, just in case, because in this house, under these clusters of greenery, you're never quite safe from the next ambush, or from your family's relentless, well-meaning attempts to manufacture a little holiday romance, one awkward kiss at a time. At dinner, it's time for Christmas crackers, cardboard tubes filled with tiny prizes, and jokes so bad they might be Victorian punishments. You pull, it pops, and suddenly you're wearing a neon paper crown, feeling like royalty in your flannel pajamas. Christmas crackers are the true highlight of the Victorian dinner table, a dangerous mix of chemistry, anticipation, and the kind of humor that could legally be classified as assault in several countries. They arrive with a satisfying clatter, stacked down the length of the table, in all their colorful, slightly lopsided glory. Every guest gets one, and the rules are simple. You cross arms, grip your neighbor's cracker, and on the count of 3, everyone tugs as if their lives, or at least their dessert, depend on it. The resulting sound is somewhere between a pop, a bang, and the scream of a startled goose. For a moment, the room is filled with the acrid scent of gunpowder and the high-pitched shrieks of a dozen startled relatives. A few crackers explode with the force of a small cannon, while others let out a sad little fizzle, their contents flopping out apologetically onto the tablecloth. If you're really unlucky, you get the dud, no pop, no toy, just a whiff of disappointment and the eternal shame of the crownless. The prizes inside are a marvel of Victorian whimsy and industrial efficiency. There's always a brittle paper crown in an alarming shade of yellow or magenta, crumpled, staticky, and perfectly sized to slip down over your ears every time you try to speak. You are required by tradition, family pressure, and unspoken law to wear this crown for the duration of dinner, no matter how undignified you look. Even the family dog is sometimes crowned, though he wears his with more grace than most of the adults. Then there are the toys. A plastic spinning top that only works on Thursdays, a tiny comb that couldn't tame a Victorian eyebrow, or a fortune-telling fish that curls up in your palm and pronounces you fickle. Sometimes you're lucky enough to receive a miniature magnifying glass, or a plastic frog that leaps directly into Aunt Gertrude's custard every single year. But the true star of the cracker isn't the toy or the crown, it's the joke. Each slip of paper contains a witticism so eye-wateringly bad, you begin to suspect the Victorians invented them as a deterrent to dinner-table conversation. Why did the turkey join the band? Because it had the drumsticks. The response is always the same, a groan, a forced laugh, and the realization that the bar for holiday humor is set so low it's practically underground. Still, there's something unifying in this chorus of groans and giggles. For one fleeting moment, the generations are united in their suffering, children, parents, and grandparents, all sharing the misery of forced merriment and awkward headwear. As dinner goes on, the paper crowns slip further down your forehead, the jokes grow more absurd, and the collection of plastic treasures expands across the table. By dessert, half the adults are wearing 2 hats apiece, and the punchline to every story seems to involve a chicken crossing the road. In the afterglow of pudding and roast, the remains of the crackers are swept aside, leaving behind a battlefield of confetti, torn paper, and tiny plastic combs that no one will ever use. The room feels a little brighter, a little sillier, and a lot more connected than it did before the first bang. You look around at your loved ones, each sporting their own ridiculous crown, still trading groan-worthy jokes, and realize that, somehow, this is the heart of Christmas. Chaos, laughter, and the joy of tradition, no matter how absurd. And so, with your neon crown askew and the world's worst joke still rattling in your brain, you raise your glass, toast the table, and accept your place in the royal family of Christmas fools. After all, in the kingdom of crackers, everyone is king, queen, and official jester for one sparkling night. Some say it's German, some say it's a Victorian prank gone too far. All you know is someone's hidden a glass pickle in the tree, and the hunt is on. Whoever finds it gets glory, and maybe a second helping of pudding. The legend of the Christmas pickle wafts through the house every December, like the faint aroma of last year's fruitcake, mysterious, slightly dubious, and impossible to ignore. Officially, the story changes each time it's told. According to one relative, it's an ancient German tradition brought over by great-great-grandmother Wilhelmina, who smuggled the first pickle in her boot. Another claims it started when a Victorian uncle, bored after too much brandy, decided to hide something truly odd in the tree just to see what would happen. Whichever story you believe, the result is always the same. Sometime between the lighting of the tree and the lighting of the Christmas pudding, someone sneaks a glass pickle into the evergreen branches, tucking it away in a forest of paper stars and aging tinsel. From that moment, the atmosphere shifts. Even the most dignified guests can't resist the thrill of the pickle hunt. Everyone has their own strategy. Some scan the branches with laser focus, others pretend disinterest, waiting for the crowd to clear before making their move. Siblings form alliances, only to betray each other at the last moment. Grandparents feign poor eyesight until the pickle is within reach, then pounce with the cunning of seasoned holiday operatives. Finding the pickle is no easy task. It's the same shade of green as the tree, only shinier, and it always seems to lurk just out of sight. Children comb through the lower branches, adults peer at impossible angles, and the family dog offers moral support by knocking over the furniture. There's much debate over whether shaking the tree is fair play. It isn't, and if mirrors or step stools count as cheating, they do, but that never stops anyone. Occasionally, someone will swear they saw the pickle move, sparking a new wave of frantic searching and a brief existential crisis about sentient vegetables. The stakes are high, or at least as high as they can be in a room full of people wearing paper crowns and brandishing mince pies. The first to spot the pickle is declared the Christmas champion, a title that comes with both honor and peril. You get an extra helping of dessert and bragging rights for a full calendar year, but you also become the target of gentle sabotage next Christmas. Your name is etched into the family memory as the one who found the pickle in 1857, a distinction that will be repeated every year at dinner, usually with embellishments. Remember the year Susan found it in under 3 minutes, and the tree nearly toppled? Legendary. For those who never win, the pickle becomes an obsession, fueling elaborate plans and even dreams of pickle-shaped glory. Some claim the whole thing is a trick, a way to keep children occupied, adults amused, and the family busy long enough for someone to sneak another nip of sherry in the kitchen. Others suspect that, like so many Victorian traditions, it's simply an excuse to introduce a little more absurdity into an already strange holiday. In the end, it doesn't matter if the pickle is truly German, Victorian, or the fevered invention of a sleep-deprived toy maker. What matters is the laughter, the shouting, the mock outrage when the youngest cousin accidentally finds the pickle twice, and the way everyone crowds together beneath the twinkling branches for the final reveal. The winner lifts the glass pickle aloft like a tiny, glistening trophy, and for one glorious moment, the whole house erupts in applause, groans, and that familiar chorus, "Next year, I'll get it for sure." Because the magic of the Christmas pickle isn't in the finding, it's in the chase, the chaos, and the comfort of knowing your family is just the right amount of ridiculous. And maybe, if you're lucky, in that second helping of pudding, earned fair and square, or at least with a little Victorian cunning. Stacks of Christmas cards pile up on the sideboard. You've received at least 3 from people you don't remember meeting and 1 passive-aggressive poem from your neighbor. Writing replies is a test of endurance and penmanship. In Victorian times, Christmas cards are not a simple afterthought. They are a full contact sport. The mere sight of a crimson envelope or an embossed robin sends a shiver through the household because everyone knows what's coming. The Great Christmas Card Exchange, a ritual requiring stamina, wit, and a supply of postage stamps large enough to start your own mail route. The cards themselves are miniature works of art, and sometimes confusion. Some are beautiful, intricate snow scenes dusted with glitter, cherubs with unsettlingly muscular arms, and robins so plump they look one mince pie away from exploding. Others, frankly, are less festive. Victorian humour leans toward the surreal. A cat in a top hat riding a penny farthing, a frog delivering gifts, or, for reasons nobody can recall, a terrifying clown peeking from a snowdrift. It's Christmas, but it's also just a little bit strange. You open a card from your great-aunt Mildred and find a picture of a dead sparrow, accompanied by the words seasons, greetings, and last respects. Charming. The process begins with a survey of the ever-growing pile. "Who's Algernon Fortescue?" someone asks. "Did we know a Hortensia Wimplethorpe?" Most of the names are familiar in the way that wallpaper patterns are familiar. You've seen them, but couldn't describe them to save your life. The one card everyone dreads is from the next-door neighbor, written in neat copperplate, with a poem that's equal parts holiday cheer and subtle threat. Wishing you joy and a hedge that stays neat. Unlike last year's disaster, which really can't repeat. Then comes the task of replying. In the 1800s, you don't just scrawl thanks, you too, and move on. No. You must match the style, wit, and penmanship of each card. The family gathers in the parlor, armed with ink pots, quills, and enough paper to deforest a small county. Each letter is a performance, long, looping script, flourishes that may or may not be intentional, and sentences filled with more formalities than a royal wedding invitation. It's a marathon of dearest regards, wishing you the finest health, and, if you're feeling daring, a hope your Christmas is less disastrous than last year's ham. The competitive spirit emerges. Father insists on using the fanciest stationery. Mother corrects everyone's grammar, and children sneak in doodles of reindeer with suspiciously human faces. You soon realize that the real challenge isn't in writing but in coming up with something new to say after your 47th card. By the time you're halfway through, your hand cramps into a permanent claw, and you begin to suspect the Victorians invented carpal tunnel as a side effect of Christmas. And then there's the postage. Each card needs a stamp, and each stamp is debated with the seriousness of an investment portfolio. Is this recipient worthy of the fancy stamp, or should you save that for Lady Whistledown across town? Someone is sent to the post office with a sack of cards and returns 3 hours later, covered in snow and muttering about a run-in with a postal goose. Despite the ordeal, there's a kind of magic in the ritual. Each card, whether beautiful, odd, or borderline threatening, is a reminder that you're connected to a web of friends, family, and mysterious acquaintances who all claim to wish you well. There's a quiet joy in seeing the sideboard fill up. Each card, a small testament to another year survived. Another set of relationships maintained, however tenuous. When the last card is posted and the last poem deciphered, you collapse with relief and a vague sense of accomplishment. Your hand may never recover, and you'll be finding glitter in the carpet until June. But for a brief, shining moment, you're part of a grand tradition, a paper trail of endurance, etiquette, and the unspoken agreement that, come next Christmas, you'll all do it again. Even if you never do figure out who Algernon Fortescue actually is. In a world before chocolate Santas, nothing says luxury like a single orange in your stocking. The annual scramble begins. Who will get the biggest, juiciest orange, and who will get a slightly withered potato? The stakes have never been higher. Victorian Christmas morning is less about extravagant gifts and more about simple, bright treasures. The orange, gleaming, round, and impossibly exotic, stands at the pinnacle of wish lists, a burst of sunshine in a world dominated by turnips, boiled beef, and endless grey. Oranges are imported luxuries, hoarded by grocers all winter, and doled out like golden tickets to a citrus-starved population. The mere rumor that this year's batch is especially fine is enough to send every child into a week-long frenzy of anticipation. Stockings are upended with the precision of a bank heist. Everyone hopes for that heavy, fragrant shape at the toe. Not too soft, the sign of impending decay. Not too hard, the sign of a Victorian trickster, with a rock and a sense of humor. There's a moment of silent prayer as you reach in, fingers crossing in search of citrus glory rather than the consolation prize. Usually a single walnut, a peppermint stick, or, for the truly unlucky, a potato that's seen better days. When you finally draw out your prize, the entire room pauses to assess. The best orange is a thing of beauty, glinting in the firelight, radiating health, and, if you're lucky, only slightly bruised from its journey across land and sea. Your siblings eye it with open envy. The dog sniffs the air, hopeful but resigned. The true battle, however, is not in the getting but in the keeping. A perfectly round, plump orange quickly becomes the object of elaborate negotiations. Someone offers to trade 2 peppermint sticks and a slice of bread. Someone else makes a daring proposal involving chores for a week. Provided the orange is especially fragrant, there are always casualties. At least one orange is inevitably dropped, rolling under the sideboard and collecting dust bunnies the size of a Victorian bonnet. Some recipients attempt to pass off a less than stellar fruit as extra sweet to a younger sibling. Woe to the child who bites in eagerly only to discover that their prize is dry, seedy, or has the texture of a baked potato. The agony is real, and the family will speak of it for years. "Remember the Christmas of the Great Orange Debacle?" they'll whisper, as you nod solemnly, clutching your compensation turnip. But for the chosen few, the proud bearers of the biggest, juiciest orange, it's a moment of genuine, gleeful triumph. The ritual of peeling the fruit is almost sacred. Everyone gathers round to watch the careful removal of zest, the release of tangy perfume into the chilly air. Segments are handed out sparingly, and even the pips are treated with respect. One lucky child might plant a seed in a pot by the window, convinced they'll soon be the proud owner of a backyard orange grove, which, given the English climate, will mostly result in disappointment and mold. Meanwhile, the less fortunate turn their potatoes into comic relief, making little faces or using them as weapons in the annual Christmas kitchen skirmish. The orange may be the ultimate prize, but a well-thrown potato is its own kind of satisfaction. In the end, the battle for the best orange is less about fruit and more about hope. It's a tiny rebellion against the bleakness of winter. A burst of color and sweetness to remind you that, for all the boiled cabbage and biting cold, the world can still offer surprises. And if, by some twist of fate, you end up with the shriveled orange or the infamous potato, take heart. You've still got the warmth of the fire, the laughter of your family, and the certain knowledge that, come next Christmas, the battle will begin again. And who knows, next year, you might just be the one holding the golden fruit. After dinner, the family gathers for games that range from mildly entertaining to outright dangerous. Pass the slipper involves everyone's feet, while Snapdragon requires you to grab raisins from a bowl of burning brandy. Fire insurance not included. Victorian Christmas isn't just about heavy food, mysterious pickles, or dodging unwanted kisses under the mistletoe. It's also about games, and not the polite, sedate sort, either. The parlor transforms into a chaotic playground, where both dignity and personal safety are quickly abandoned. There are no screens, no board games with complicated instructions, just a room full of relatives and a burning desire to outdo each other before someone puts an eye out. Pass the slipper is the perfect icebreaker, in the sense that it makes everyone question their life choices. The rules are simple. Everyone sits in a circle, and someone, usually the smallest, fastest child, takes a slipper and scurries behind the group, secretly placing it in someone's lap. As soon as the slipper is found, chaos erupts. The goal is to slap the slipper on the ground and chase the thief around the circle, ideally without tripping over your own feet or Aunt Mildred's skirt. Accusations fly, laughter bounces off the walls, and at least one person will fall over, guaranteeing a bruise and a story for next year's Christmas letter. No one ever really knows who wins. The only guarantee is that the slipper will eventually go missing until Easter, at which point it's discovered in the coal bin. And then comes Snapdragon, the most pyrotechnic of all Victorian amusements. The game begins with a large bowl filled with brandy and a generous helping of raisins. The bowl is set on a sturdy table, the lights are dimmed, and someone produces a box of matches with the confidence of a magician. With a flourish, the brandy is lit, flames leap into the air, and now you're all standing around a literal bowl of fire, ready to plunge your hands in and snatch out as many raisins as you dare. The heat singes your knuckles, and the flickering blue flames make everyone look either heroic or mildly unhinged. Safety, as always, is relative. Children are usually encouraged to watch and learn, while adults pretend this isn't the third time they've scorched their sleeve. Why did Victorians invent a game that could double as a circus act? Possibly to keep things exciting between pudding courses, possibly as a subtle way of thinning out the gene pool. Either way, Snapdragon is equal parts thrill, danger, and proof that holiday spirit sometimes involves actual spirits set on fire. Each raisin you catch is supposed to grant you good luck, which is helpful since the real luck is not burning down the parlor or setting fire to your festive paper crown. Other games join the fray: blind man's bluff, charades, and a game known only as the laughing game, which is basically an excuse to fall off the furniture while pretending you're not dizzy from all the mulled wine. There's a sense of generational warfare as grandparents try to outwit grandchildren. Uncles show off their hidden athletic prowess, and the dog joins in, grabbing the slipper and refusing to let go until bribed with half a mince pie. As the evening winds down, everyone collapses in a heap of tangled limbs, singed fingers, and uncontrollable giggles. It's hard to say who won what, but everyone claims a moral victory just for surviving. The family stories grow more dramatic each year. Remember when Cousin Edward set his sleeve on fire? Or the year the slipper went out the window and was never seen again? These are the true trophies: bruised egos, happy chaos, and a warm reminder that sometimes the best way to spend Christmas is in a room full of laughter, questionable decisions, and the comforting scent of raisins, burnt brandy, and singed dignity. And as the embers die down and the last game ends, you know that these oddball traditions, dangerous, ridiculous, and endlessly funny, are the real gifts you'll unwrap year after year, long after the last raisin has vanished, and the missing slipper becomes next Christmas's greatest mystery. Everyone holds their breath as the youngest is allowed to light a candle on the tree. The spectacle is beautiful, fleeting, and ever so slightly terrifying. One wrong move, and it's a very different kind of Christmas. This is not your gently twinkling, LED-lit modern Christmas tree. This is the Victorian version, a proud evergreen perched in the middle of the parlor, festooned with homemade ornaments, paper chains, and dozens of little wax candles balanced precariously on its branches. The effect is magical, if your definition of magic involves a high chance of minor catastrophe. Setting the mood is easy. Setting the tree on fire, even easier. The ceremony begins with a family meeting about safety. Safety, in this case, means a few buckets of water, one with a suspicious-looking mop floating in it, a wool blanket for smothering flames, and Uncle Cyril standing by with a pair of fireplace tongs, and the kind of look that says he's seen this go sideways before. The youngest is given the honor of lighting the first candle, mostly because small hands are less likely to knock over the tree, statistically, but not historically. Everyone crowds around, breath misting in the air, as the match is struck. The candles catch, one by one, flickering to life with little pops and hisses. For a moment, the entire room is transformed into a wonderland. Gold light shimmering over tinsel, shadows dancing on the wallpaper, the soft smell of pine and hot wax weaving through the air. There is an intake of breath, a collective hush, as if the world itself is holding still. The parlor glows. The tree seems to shimmer. You could almost forget the lurking threat of combustion, but the anxiety never quite leaves. You're always aware, deep down, that what you're really witnessing is an 1800s version of extreme sports. Adults hover nearby, eyes fixed on the tree, ready to leap into action at the faintest wisp of smoke. Children are repeatedly told to keep their distance, as if anyone could resist getting close to a flaming tree. The dog, blissfully unaware of the danger, wags his tail dangerously near the lower branches and is promptly banished to the kitchen for his own safety and everyone else's. Lighting all the candles is a process that takes nerves of steel and the patience of a saint. Some burn bright and steady, others flicker with alarming enthusiasm. A few stubborn ones refuse to light, as if sensing the potential for drama and wanting no part of it. All the while, someone is telling the story of the year the parlor nearly went up in smoke, which gets more harrowing with each retelling and is guaranteed to make everyone flinch if a candle drips wax on the rug. As the flames settle, the family gathers to admire the spectacle. There is singing, sometimes a shaky silent night, sometimes a rousing carol that drowns out the faint sound of wax hitting the carpet. Children stare in awe, adults snap mental photographs, and for a few precious minutes, everyone is united in hope, fear, and the desire for just one Christmas without a visit from the fire brigade. Eventually, practicality wins out. The candles are blown out, one by one, with great ceremony. Everyone cheers quietly, partly because it's tradition, partly because they're relieved to still have a roof over their heads. The room cools, the light dims, and you're left with a memory of flickering candles, nervous laughter, and the unmistakable thrill of surviving another Victorian holiday tradition. Because, as anyone who's ever stood in a room full of blazing wax and pine can tell you, Christmas magic is beautiful, but it's even better when it doesn't end with singed eyebrows and a new hole in the parlor rug. The day after Christmas is for giving boxes of leftovers and small gifts to the household staff. If you're the staff, you're finally allowed to breathe, eat, and, if you're lucky, sneak a swig of the master's sherry. Boxing Day in the 1800s is, on the surface, about generosity and gratitude. In practice, it's also about leftovers, exhaustion, and the delicate art of pretending you haven't been plotting small acts of rebellion since Michaelmas. For the well-to-do, it's a day to pat themselves on the back for their charity. For everyone working below stairs, it's a holiday in the sense that you only have to do half your normal amount of work, and you might just get a present that isn't socks. The morning begins with the gentry bustling about, gathering up scraps of goose, sad lumps of plum pudding, and the odd mince pie that somehow survived the previous day's chaos. Everything is packed into neat little boxes, tied with string, and ceremonially handed over to the staff. The gift is often accompanied by a speech from the lady of the house, who declares her eternal gratitude to everyone for making Christmas so very special. This is code for, thank you for keeping the family from perishing in a flaming pudding accident. If you're one of the servants, the ritual is familiar. Smile, curtsy, and accept your box with an air of heartfelt surprise, as if you hadn't watched cooks squirrel away the best cuts of beef last night for just this purpose. Inside the box might be a coin or two, a crumbling biscuit, or, if your employers are especially generous, a bolt of fabric, or some gloves that are only slightly used. The real prize is the freedom that follows. For the rest of the day, you're released from relentless chores and permitted, expected, even, to have a little fun at the household's expense. Below stairs, the mood shifts from duty to delight. The kitchen, which yesterday was a battleground of boiling pots and shouted instructions, becomes a haven of laughter, music, and sneaked mouthfuls of sherry. Cook whips up her special punch, heavy on the brandy, and the scullery maid finally gets a chance to sit down, feet up, grinning at the absurdity of it all. Someone finds a leftover cracker crown and places it atop the butler's head. He endures the indignity with a stoic smile, quietly relieved there are no house guests to witness his brief lapse in decorum. If there's one tradition that unites all staff, it's the annual leftovers banquet. Every treat the family overlooked is fair game. Slivers of ham, cold roast potatoes, that last stubborn wedge of Stilton, and, of course, the remains of the pudding. The meal is washed down with whatever the footman managed to rescue from the dregs of the punch bowl. Gossip flows as freely as the sherry. with stories swapped about the day's disasters, who dropped the flaming pudding, who set the parlor curtains smouldering, who caught Uncle Bernard snoring in the broom cupboard. For a few sweet hours, the world tilts in their favor. Even the strictest housekeeper might look the other way, as the under-butler teaches everyone the polka, or as the stable boy attempts, with varying success, to juggle oranges and potatoes filched from the family's stockings. There's a sense of shared survival, another Christmas endured, another year's worth of stories to embellish and retell. Small acts of rebellion are traded like currency, an extra slice of cake, a cheeky toast to the masters upstairs. May their socks always match, and their puddings never explode. As evening falls, the servants gather in the kitchen, warm and drowsy, letting the last of the brandy do its work. Tomorrow, it will be back to work as usual. But tonight, the boundaries between upstairs and downstairs blur just a little. For once, the staff are the kings and queens of their own world, ruling over a kingdom of crumbs and laughter, plotting next year's mischief, and savoring the rare pleasure of a day well and truly won. Bundled in every blanket you own, you climb into a creaky sleigh for a ride through the frosty countryside. It's festive, it's scenic, and if you make it back with all your toes, it's a Christmas miracle. The air outside is sharp and biting, carrying the scent of wood smoke and distant plum pudding. Your family insists that a sleigh ride is the only way to see the countryside in winter, which is technically true, though it's also an excellent way to test the resilience of your circulation. You're wrapped in so many layers of wool, flannel, and hand-me-down tartan shawls that you resemble a slightly nervous bale of hay. Someone inevitably forgets their mittens and is forced to improvise with spare socks or, if desperation strikes, a length of kitchen towel. The sleigh itself is a Victorian marvel. Wooden, with iron runners and a faint smell of ancient upholstery and mothballs. A cushion, stuffed with what you suspect is leftover Yule log sawdust, offers minimal protection against the freezing wind. The family piles in, squashing together in a futile attempt to share warmth and elbow room. The lucky one gets the seat next to the hot brick, an early, and only slightly effective, attempt at heating technology. Everyone else clings to the promise of warm mince pies upon your return. The horse, festooned with bells and a general air of resignation, snorts clouds of steam into the air. Your uncle, self-proclaimed master of all things equestrian, cracks the reins, and with a jolt, you're off, gliding, bouncing, and occasionally lurching sideways as the sleigh finds every frozen rut and molehill in the county. The bells jingle, snow crunches beneath the runners, and the wind does its best to rearrange your hair into a style best described as winter panic. The world is transformed. Trees sparkle with frost, their branches arching overhead like icy cathedrals. Fields lie under blankets of snow, marked here and there by rabbit tracks or the occasional, confused-looking sheep. If you squint, it's almost magical, until the wind whips around the corner and finds the one gap in your scarf, sending a chill straight down your spine. The children shriek with laughter, faces glowing red as they attempt to catch snowflakes on their tongues. The adults, meanwhile, try to maintain a stoic facade while quietly wondering how much longer until their toes stop tingling. Conversation is a battle between chattering teeth and the relentless jingle of the harness bells. Someone starts a carol, Jingle Bells, for the 6th time, and is swiftly shushed by those who prefer Silent Night, or at least a little actual silence. Your aunt recalls the infamous Christmas of '42, when the sleigh tipped over into a drift, and half the family had to be dug out by neighbors wielding shovels and opinions. Everyone laughs, mostly because it's better than thinking about how cold your knees are. Halfway through the journey, there's a brief stop for scenic appreciation and, more importantly, a chance to stamp your feet and check for signs of frostbite. Someone produces a flask of something medicinal that tastes suspiciously like sherry mixed with regret. Spirits rise, and the adults trade stories of sleigh rides past. The time the horse bolted, the time someone lost a shoe, the time you nearly ran down the vicar on his way to church. At last, the sleigh turns for home, and the promise of hot drinks and a roaring fire propels everyone through the final, bumpy stretch. As you tumble out, legs stiff and noses numb, you realize you've survived yet another Victorian tradition, part ordeal, part adventure, all wrapped up in the absurd coziness of family life. And as you thaw out by the hearth, sipping something warm and sweet, the sleigh ride is already becoming another cherished story for next year. The day you braved the winter wilds in search of Christmas spirit and found it somewhere between the frozen fields and the collective shivering of a family too stubborn to stay inside. The family attempts to ice skate on the pond. Some glide, some wobble, and at least one relative will fall through a thin patch of ice, earning eternal storytelling rights and possibly pneumonia. Victorian Christmas would not be complete without the annual migration to the local pond. A patch of questionable ice surrounded by reeds, determined ducks, and the ghost of last year's mishap. Everyone bundles up, hoping that enough wool layers can substitute for actual skating skills. Scarves are wound until only your eyes show, hats are pulled low, and someone always forgets their gloves, bravely sacrificing feeling in their fingers for the cause of holiday cheer. You arrive at the pond with skates that may have last been sharpened during the Napoleonic Wars. The family optimist insists it's perfectly safe this year, while the family pessimist quietly notes the ominous cracks near the edge. The dog, who is always up for a bad idea, darts ahead, slipping around like a furry torpedo and setting the tone for the afternoon. Grandfather claims he hasn't skated since Queen Victoria was a lass, but ties on his ancient leather skates anyway, determined to relive his glory days. Never mind that those days ended with a spectacular collision with a snowman in 1864. The brave and the foolish take to the ice first. Some launch forward in elegant arcs, gliding effortlessly as if auditioning for the Royal Ballet. Others manage a shuffling, arm-flapping progress, looking more like startled penguins than graceful Victorians. A handful spend more time horizontal than vertical, landing on the ice with theatrical yelps and enough laughter to shake the snow from the branches overhead. As the afternoon wears on, the true ice skating disaster emerges. Someone, usually the cousin who brags the loudest, pushes their luck, drifting toward the thin patch of ice, marked by suspiciously dark water, and the collective shouts of a tense moment, a wobble, and then, crack. The ice gives way. With a shriek and a splash, they vanish up to their knees, or worse, in water cold enough to shock the ancestors. Rescue operations commence. A human chain, frantic shouting, and someone running home for a change of woolen trousers and a stern lecture about listening to your elders. The event is less a tragedy and more a rite of passage. The victim is wrapped in every available coat and sat next to the fire, cradling a mug of hot tea and basking in the glory of having provided this year's most memorable entertainment. "Remember when you fell in" becomes the refrain at every family gathering for decades. "And you ruined Aunt Gertrude's best muffler?" Laughter follows, good-natured and a little bit jealous of the attention. Meanwhile, the skating continues. Those still upright attempt figure eights, only to discover that the ice is less forgiving than it looks. There are more tumbles, a few spectacular spins, and at least one accidental game of human curling. The dog continues his campaign of chaos, darting between legs and occasionally making off with an abandoned mitten. Hot drinks appear from thermoses, along with a plate of slightly frozen mince pies that are declared delicious by those who can't feel their teeth anyway. As dusk settles in and the cold deepens, everyone gradually limps back home, trailing wet scarves and tall tales. The day's disasters become the stuff of legend, growing more dramatic with each retelling. "It was up to my waist. The fish tried to pull me under. I only survived because I landed on an old Christmas pudding." The stories warm you more than the fire ever could. In the end, the ice skating disaster isn't really a disaster at all. It's a badge of honor, a reason to gather close, to laugh at yourselves and each other, and to remember that the best Christmas memories are the ones you never planned, the ones that start with a wobble, end with a splash, and become part of your family's Christmas folklore forever. You sit down with pen and paper to write your wishes to Father Christmas. The requests range from practical, new boots, to desperate, year without boiled cabbage, to wildly optimistic, a pet elephant. Letter writing is a sacred Christmas ritual in the 1800s, a chance for children and adults alike to spill their hearts onto the page, hoping that somewhere out there, a jolly, soot-streaked gentleman will read their pleas and take mercy. You find your favorite spot in the parlor, maybe at a rickety desk or just cross-legged by the fire, and dig out the family's ink pot and a feather that has seen better days. The air is filled with the scent of wax, coal, and mild desperation as everyone debates the proper opening salutation. "Dear Father Christmas," some begin, while the bolder opt for "to the most generous spirit of the North," hedging their bets in case Santa has an ego. Your wish list starts off respectably enough. "New boots, please," you write, with the humble clarity of someone who's spent 3 winters patching up holes with waxed paper, a scarf that isn't itchy, a stocking without holes, and maybe, if you're feeling daring, some socks that match each other. Your younger siblings' letters spiral quickly from practical to improbable. A doll that blinks, a train that runs on its own. And, because there's always an overachiever, a golden carriage, a monkey, and a top hat with bells, the family dog puts in for a larger bone and less competition from the neighbor's cat. Once the basics are out of the way, you get creative. After all, this is the one time of year when hope and humor can mingle without judgment. Please, Father Christmas, if you have any influence at all, a year without boiled cabbage would be a mercy to all. You suspect the old man is sympathetic. Surely he's been subjected to Victorian cooking before. And if you happen to have a pet elephant handy, I promise to walk it daily and never let it eat the parlor rug. Why not ask? If nothing else, it'll give the family something to talk about over tea. The process is more communal than you might expect. Everyone shares their requests aloud, sparking a round of commentary. Your brother mocks your practical approach, insisting that only the bold get what they truly want. Your sister, the family realist, writes simply, "Just don't forget me this year." Your parents, not to be left out, joke about requesting peace and quiet, a full night's sleep, and, if possible, a working coal stove. When it's time to post the letters, there's a small parade to the hearth. Tradition states that if you burn your letter in the fireplace, the smoke will carry your wishes straight up the chimney to Father Christmas's workshop. There is, of course, no scientific evidence for this, but no one lets facts get in the way of hope. Everyone crowds around, watching their lists curl into ash, sending a year's worth of dreams, jokes, and not-so-subtle hints up into the winter night. Occasionally, a particularly heartfelt or outrageous request is saved instead of burned, tucked away in the family Bible or between the pages of last year's almanac, to be rediscovered and laughed at in years to come. There's something comforting in the ritual, in the blend of earnest longing and silly optimism. The act of writing the letter matters almost as much as anything that might arrive in your stocking, because, at its heart, the Victorian Christmas wish list is about more than getting presents. It's about believing, for just a moment, that your voice matters, that somewhere in the frost and chimney smoke, someone is listening. Whether your wish is for a toy, a miracle, or simply a break from cabbage, you finish your letter with a flourish, sign your name with hope, and trust that Christmas magic is reading along, smiling at every outrageous request. At last, the main event, the Christmas goose. It's roasted to a crisp, carved with ceremony, and debated endlessly. Is it better than turkey? Will there be enough stuffing? Will someone start a food fight? All signs point to yes. The Christmas goose looms large in the Victorian imagination, and even larger on the dinner table. You can smell it before you see it, rich, savory, with a hint of scorched feathers and thyme. The kitchen has been occupied all day, commandeered by a small army of aunts, each insisting they know the only true way to baste, stuff, and roast a bird. A debate rages behind closed doors. More sage, less salt. Why is the cat licking the gravy boat? The air is thick with tension, flour, dust, and the knowledge that, by sundown, someone's going to have strong feelings about the stuffing. When the goose finally emerges, it does so in a cloud of steam and a procession worthy of a state occasion. Every head turns, every fork is raised. There is a hush, broken only by the sizzle of hot fat and the scuffle of feet as everyone jockeys for a better seat. Father, who has not been trusted with a kitchen knife all year, is suddenly promoted to chief carver, wielding his blade with the gravity of a surgeon and the nerves of a circus juggler. "Watch your fingers," someone whispers. "Watch the silver," someone else hisses, as the goose trembles beneath the onslaught. The carving itself is performance art. Each slice is inspected, commented upon, and, depending on the relative, either praised to the skies or eyed with deep suspicion. Perfectly done. A little pink, don't you think? At least it's not as dry as last year's turkey. Plates fill up with juicy slices, heaps of stuffing, roast potatoes, and whatever root vegetables survived the kitchen skirmish. The children, with eyes bigger than their stomachs, pile on everything, only to realize halfway through the meal that goose is far richer than expected. Of course, debate over the bird's merits is as much a tradition as the meal itself. Is goose superior to turkey? Your uncle swears by the crispy skin and rich flavor, while your aunt mourns the absence of the noble turkey breast. The conversation grows philosophical, then theatrical, and soon forks are waved with the solemnity of parliamentary debate. Meanwhile, your cousin starts quietly flinging peas at the dog, who has wisely stationed himself under the table, ready to catch any stray morsel or seize on the first sign of an all-out food fight. The meal is punctuated by small disasters. Someone drops their bread sauce, a glass is knocked over, and an emergency run for more gravy is launched with all the urgency of a military campaign. Yet, amid the chaos, there's a warmth that transcends even the hottest oven. Laughter rings out, stories are swapped, and the memory of past dinners is revived. Remember when we tried to serve pheasant? Never again. Or the year the goose caught fire, and didn't Uncle Alfred get the wishbone stuck in his teeth? As plates empty and the debate winds down, there's a collective sigh of satisfaction. The goose, once a spectre haunting the kitchen, is now a pleasant memory and an ominous promise of leftovers. The last scraps are gathered up for sandwiches, the bones destined for soup, and the stuffing, if any remains, guarded fiercely by whoever managed to sneak the extra helping. The Christmas goose isn't just a meal, it's the centerpiece of chaos, comedy, and culinary ambition, roasted and shared with all the madness and love that only a family Christmas can conjure. And whether you prefer goose, turkey, or just the stuffing and the stories, you leave the table knowing this: the legend of the Christmas goose will return next year, even bigger, crispier, and certainly more hotly debated than ever. Mysteriously, the ham has disappeared from the larder. Was it the dog, the children, or an early attempt at vegetarianism? Family accusations fly as you eat boiled carrots and wonder what might have been. Every family has its Christmas mysteries, but few compare to the annual enigma of the missing ham. It was there yesterday, a magnificent, glistening centerpiece, glazed and adorned with a crown of cloves, promising salty, smoky bliss for days to come. Today, it's vanished, leaving only a faint aroma and a sticky spot on the larder shelf as evidence that it ever existed at all. The discovery is met with gasps of disbelief and a flurry of panicked inventory. The kitchen is turned upside down, drawers are checked, cupboards ransacked, even the flour bin is inspected, just in case someone decided to bury it for extra flavor. The search party expands to include the dog, whose innocent brown eyes and suspiciously greasy whiskers make him the prime suspect. He is questioned thoroughly, but offers only a burp and a wag as his alibi. Next, suspicion falls on the children. After all, they've been unusually quiet all morning, a sure sign of mischief. The youngest is interrogated first, unable to maintain a poker face for more than 30 seconds. The tale unfolds. Someone heard mysterious noises last night. Footsteps, a creak, possibly even the soft sound of ham being stealthily devoured. The eldest child is adamant that it must have been the wind, or perhaps Father Christmas on a late-night snack run. The middle child, meanwhile, offers an elaborate theory involving burglars, the family cat, and a cunning plan to frame the dog. Accusations fly faster than mince pies at a food fight. Aunt Edna, a lifelong devotee of meatless Wednesdays, is eyed with suspicion. Could this be her subtle campaign for more root vegetables and fewer festive roasts? She denies all knowledge, but her triumphant grin at the sight of another carrot is impossible to ignore. Grandfather, ever the sleuth, announces he will get to the bottom of the case, but is quickly distracted by a decanter of sherry and a rerun of the Great Goose debacle of '53. As the meal proceeds, you are forced to make do with boiled carrots, limp cabbage, and potatoes with the flavor profile of old socks. The absence of the ham becomes the only thing anyone can talk about. Remember when we had ham? Someone sighs wistfully. It was glorious. Another joins in. Best ham of my life. And now it's gone. Like my hopes and dreams. Someone starts composing a tragic ballad, and before long, a sing-along of "O Ham, where art thou?" echoes through the kitchen. Theories multiply. Was it an inside job? Did the cook, unable to resist, sneak away with the prized ham to share with the other staff below stairs? Did the neighbor's notorious goat, known for scaling fences and devouring entire vegetable patches, pay a midnight visit? Or was it, as Mother suggests, the universe's way of telling the family to lay off the salt and embrace a leaner holiday menu? By the end of the day, the case remains unsolved. The family dog, belly full and suspiciously sleepy, dreams in the corner. The children maintain their innocence, though their cheeks are oddly shiny and their stories inconsistent. Aunt Edna claims victory for vegetarianism, and the rest of the family vow revenge on whoever stole the festive joy. But if you listen closely, as you drift off to sleep, you'll hear it. The laughter, the wild theories, the exaggerated mourning for the lost ham. For while the ham itself may have vanished, its legend has grown tenfold, immortalized in song, story, and the kind of Christmas chaos that, deep down, everyone secretly loves. And next year, as a new ham is paraded into the larder, every eye will be watching, every door will be double-locked, and the family will wait for the next chapter in the ongoing saga of the case of the vanishing Christmas ham. Bundled up and half asleep, you trudge to midnight church service with the whole village. You battle drowsiness, candle wax drips, and the temptation to sneak home early for leftover pudding. This is the Christmas rite that separates the faithful from the merely hungry. The streets are dark and frost-laced, your breath misting in the air as you follow the wavering light of lanterns, marching in a sleepy parade toward the church. Every member of the family is wrapped in at least 2 layers of scarves, 3 if your mother has her way, with mittens hastily dried over the stove, and boots still lined with last week's straw. You bump elbows with neighbors and try not to slip on the icy lane, a challenge complicated by the fact that your eyes are already half closed. Inside the old stone church, warmth is a myth, and time moves strangely. The pews are as cold and hard as the village gossip. You claim your spot, hoping for a view of the candles and maybe, if luck is with you, a cushion with only minor historical stains. The scent of wax and evergreen mingles with the aroma of slightly damp wool coats and the unmistakable tang of someone's after-dinner onions. You wedge yourself between relatives and resign yourself to a night of ritual, rumination, and the occasional well-timed nap. The service begins, slow and solemn, echoing off the high beams and filling the shadows with ancient music. The choir's voices rise, sometimes beautifully, sometimes just bravely, and you clutch your hymn book like a life raft. Each verse drags you further from consciousness, but also closer to Christmas morning. Your mind wanders, to visions of pudding, to the warmth of bed, to the question of whether you could get away with resting your eyes just for a moment. Surely no one will notice behind your scarf and strategically lowered hat. The candles flicker, sending pools of golden light over the stone walls. Children squirm and adults attempt to look alert, though half the congregation is in a trance. Every so often, a wax strip lands on someone's glove, drawing a hiss and a whispered oath that is decidedly un-Christmas-like. Someone's stomach rumbles audibly, and the choir stifles a laugh. The vicar's sermon is both timeless and, if you're honest, a little endless. Every sentence a gentle challenge to stay awake and remember the reason you're all here. For those with stamina, the midnight service is magical. There's a hush to the church, a sense of suspended reality. For others, it's a battle against gravity. Heads droop, eyelids flutter, and the back row becomes a field of nodding heads and softly snoring parishioners. Children lean against parents, clutching candlesticks with buttery fingers, and dream of oranges and toys and a morning without chores. There's always at least one uncle who claims he's deep in prayer but is, by all appearances, deep in REM sleep. Outside, snow begins to fall, softening the sounds of the village and dusting the churchyard in white. You lose track of time. The hymns, the candles, and the low, steady hum of the organ wrap around you like another layer of blanket. For a few minutes, you forget your frozen toes and growling stomach, caught up in the peaceful absurdity of it all. When the final Amen echoes through the nave, you blink awake, not entirely sure you haven't dreamed the entire thing. The village streams back outside, wishing each other Merry Christmas and comparing notes on who managed to stay conscious. The long walk home is full of shivers and anticipation for what tomorrow holds. You slip into bed with fingers still tingling from the cold, ears humming with half-remembered carols. The leftover pudding is calling, but your pillow is louder. As you drift off, you realize you've survived another midnight service, a triumph of endurance, tradition, and the eternal hope that next year the vicar might just keep it under an hour. Full of pudding, ham, and exactly one orange, you collapse onto a faded sofa. As snores fill the room, and someone plays Silent Night on an out-of-tune piano, you marvel at surviving another truly strange, utterly Victorian Christmas. It's the hour when time stretches and everything slows down. The dining room table is a wasteland of crumbs, sticky wine glasses, abandoned paper crowns, and gravy stains destined to become part of the family tartan. A stray sprig of holly is stuck to the dog, who's snoring under the sideboard, dreaming of ham heist glory. The older relatives have drifted toward armchairs and couches, claiming them like tired pioneers planting flags on distant shores. The younger cousins have collapsed in a pile near the hearth, their energy finally consumed by too much parlor gaming, frantic pickle hunting, and possibly one secret mouthful too many of sherry trifle. You sink deeper into the threadbare cushions, listening to the medley of snores and sleep mutterings that fills the room. Every Victorian household has its signature symphony, the gentle wheeze of grandfather in the rocking chair, the soft, high-pitched whimper of cousin Emily dreaming about winning the Christmas cracker championship, the erratic rumble of Uncle Alfred, who is somehow both asleep and still chewing. If you listen closely, you can almost pick out the subtle, off-key notes of Silent Night drifting from the piano in the corner, where someone, usually with more enthusiasm than talent, insists on ending the evening with music. This is the golden hour of Christmas, when conversation has faded into a kind of comfortable haze. The air is thick with the scent of burnt candle wax, pine needles, overcooked sprouts, and the ghostly memory of flaming pudding. Here and there, a half-eaten mince pie is abandoned on a saucer. An uneaten slice of fruitcake sits untouched, its density a silent challenge to any who dare. Somewhere, a forgotten cracker joke flutters to the floor, its pun just as bad the second time around. You gaze around the room and realize that, for all the chaos, nothing could feel more peaceful. The piles of torn wrapping paper, the melted snow pooling by the door, the lopsided Christmas tree bravely holding on to its last few ornaments. These are the signs of a holiday well and truly survived. It's not perfection that matters, but endurance. The ability to laugh through the pudding fires, forgive the missing ham, and find joy in the mess, the noise, and the certainty that nothing ever goes quite to plan. Some family members are still half awake, recounting the highlights of the day in low, meandering voices. Remember when the dog nearly ate the pickle? Did you see Aunt Edith's face when she found the onion in her stocking? I swear, next year, I'm hiding the oranges. The stories mix with yawns and giggles, building a living scrapbook that will be revisited, probably with increasing exaggeration, every year. As the fire dwindles to glowing embers and the piano falls mercifully silent, you pull a blanket over your knees and let your eyes drift shut. There is something timeless in the exhaustion, something oddly triumphant in the way everyone surrenders to sleep, scattered across a landscape of threadbare furniture and holiday detritus. Even the dog, belly round and dreams full of turkey, looks content, because at the end of it all, this is what a Victorian Christmas is really about. Not the grand gestures, the perfect pudding, or even the infamous ham. It's the collapse, the heap of family and friends sharing warmth, laughter, and the quiet satisfaction of another holiday survived. And as you drift off, lulled by the snores of generations and the fading strains of silent night, you find yourself grateful for the mess, the madness, and the peculiar magic of a truly strange Christmas. After dinner, the prized wishbone from the Christmas bird is displayed like the Olympic torch. Two relatives square off, pinkies trembling with anticipation. The winner gets a year of supposed good luck. The loser pretends not to care while quietly plotting revenge for next year's poultry showdown. It's a ritual as entrenched as overcooked sprouts and burnt pudding. The ceremonial wishbone duel. In the afterglow of a grand Christmas feast, as the last gravy boats are cleared and the remains of the goose or turkey are picked clean, someone remembers the wishbone. A hush falls over the room, a hush laced with tension, competitiveness, and barely suppressed giggles. The wishbone, gleaming and fragile, is paraded before the assembled relatives with all the reverence of a royal scepter. Choosing the contestants is never easy. Tradition suggests the youngest and the oldest, or perhaps the two most competitive souls in the family. In reality, it's often just the first two to lunge for it while everyone else is still digesting. This year, it's Cousin Henry, last year's controversial loser, and Aunt Beatrice, known for her iron grip and questionable sportsmanship. The rest of the family forms a ring around them, offering encouragement, warnings, and unhelpful commentary. Remember to pull, not twist. Don't blink. Watch out for last year's gravy stain. With a dramatic flourish, the contenders lock pinkies around the wishbone, each plotting their approach. The air thrums with anticipation. It's part sporting event, part theatre, part psychological warfare. Some families believe in pre-match rituals, rubbing the wishbone for luck, chanting an ancestral rhyme, or just glaring menacingly at your opponent. Aunt Beatrice goes with her usual strategy: a wink, a smirk, and a whispered, "May the best woman win." The room falls silent. Tension thickens. On the count of three, both pull, gentle at first, then with mounting ferocity. The wishbone strains and creaks, everyone leans forward, and time seems to freeze as the thin bone stretches to its limit. There's always that final, nerve-wracking moment. Will it snap cleanly, or shatter into disappointing splinters? At last, crack, it breaks in two, and the crowd erupts in cheers and sympathetic groans. The winner waves their piece triumphantly, already making grand proclamations about their lucky year to come. No burnt cakes, no stubbed toes, and perhaps a Christmas with slightly less cabbage. The loser, attempting dignity, shrugs and insists they never believed in luck anyway. In reality, they're quietly plotting a comeback, analyzing every detail of their grip and technique. Sibling rivalry is reignited, cousins are inspired to practice year-round, and Aunt Beatrice promises a rematch that could shake the very rafters of the parlor. But the wishbone tradition isn't just about competition, it's about hope, the very act of making a wish, of believing that the world can be tipped in your favor by the right combination of poultry bones and determination, is the essence of Christmas magic. In a world of unpredictable winters and questionable plumbing, a little extra luck is nothing to scoff at. Even those who scoff the loudest are secretly the most invested, making silent wishes as they clear the table or tuck the winning piece into their waistcoat pocket for safekeeping. After the excitement, the wishbone fragments are carefully collected. Some families keep the winner's piece as a lucky charm, tucking it above a doorframe or into a keepsake box, ready to boast about next Christmas. Others bury it discreetly in the garden, returning the magic to the earth in the hope that fortune, and perhaps another bird, will grow. As the evening winds down, the story of the tug-of-war is already being retold, each telling a little more dramatic than the last. The wishbone becomes legend, the rivalry continues, and everyone, winner or loser, shares in the laughter and anticipation for next year's contest. Because, in the end, the greatest wish is simply to gather together again, another Christmas survived, another wishbone conquered, another story to pass down the generations. It wouldn't be a Victorian holiday without every room in the house reeking of oranges stuck with cloves, half-melted pine sap, and that one dried apple pomander Aunt Agnes made in 1832, The air is so thick with fragrance you start to hallucinate nutmeg. Breathing is a festive challenge. Every December, the parlor is transformed into what can only be described as a botanist's fever dream. Before the first log is thrown on the fire, or the tree is even considered, the house is doused with a potent blend of homemade aromatics, Victorian code for things that look decorative and smell like spiced furniture polish. Mother claims it purifies the soul, clears the air, and repels ungrateful spirits, but you suspect it's mostly a cover for last week's burnt cabbage incident. The creation of Christmas potpourri is a group activity. Whether you want it to be or not, you're recruited into the production line, handed a bowl of cloves, and told to spear every orange in the house until your fingers go numb. Slices of apple are carefully dried by the fire, sometimes with a dash of cinnamon, sometimes with a side of ash. When the youngest sibling gets creative with the poker, pine cones are foraged, bundled, and dipped in wax, sometimes scented, sometimes just whatever was left at the bottom of the candle drawer. If you're particularly unlucky, someone tries to get creative with bay leaves, resulting in a living room that smells like both a bakery and a medicine chest. The end result is a house saturated with scent. The pomanders are hung from every doorknob, dangle above your bed, and are tucked into coat pockets for good luck and freshness. It is, in theory, charming. In practice, you spend the season blinking back tears and wondering if a person can actually become intoxicated by citrus fumes. At night, you fall asleep to the competing fragrances of dried lavender and what might be eucalyptus, depending on what the grocer was discounting that week. The most notorious of all is Aunt Agnes's dried apple pomander, which has hung in the hallway since 1832, and now resembles something you'd find at the bottom of an archaeological dig. It's a family relic, guarded as fiercely as the silver, but every so often someone nudges it and releases a fresh cloud of century-old spice into the atmosphere. You sneeze, you cough, and the entire household feels somehow more festive. Visitors are not immune to the aromatic onslaught. Neighbors step inside and are immediately overwhelmed, struggling to complement the delightful scent while their eyes water and their handkerchiefs make a desperate appearance. The vicar, who comes by to bless the pudding, leaves with his nostrils so full of clove he can't taste his tea for a week. Even the family dog, normally immune to anything short of a roasting joint, gives the front parlor a wide berth. Despite the olfactory onslaught, there's a strange comfort in the tradition. The smells of spiced orange, pine, and ancient apple become as much a part of Christmas as the pudding or the pickle. They linger in your clothes, in your hair, in the corners of the house, long after the decorations are boxed away and the last of the leftovers are eaten. You can't imagine a Christmas without them, even if you sometimes wish you could breathe without detecting notes of nutmeg from 3 rooms away. In the end, the inescapable scent of Christmas potpourri is part of what makes a Victorian holiday unmistakable. Over the top, a little absurd, and unforgettable in every possible sense. As you open the window to let in a draft of unscented air, you realize it's these quirky rituals, fragrant, overwhelming, and just a little bit ridiculous, that make the season, and your family, entirely your own. Once the dinner plates are cleared, it's time for the children, and any adults who can't hide fast enough, to recite memorized poems or sing a carol. Stumbling through the night before Christmas while the entire family watches in judgment is a rite of passage. Every mispronounced word is lovingly mocked until next Christmas. It begins innocently enough. A gentle call for entertainment rings out from the parlor as the last scraps of pudding vanish, and everyone pretends not to notice the pile of dirty dishes lurking in the scullery. But soon, chairs are pushed back, a makeshift stage is created in front of the fire, and the oldest aunt is appointed master of ceremonies, her spectacles perched menacingly on the end of her nose. Escape is futile. Children are rounded up, fidgeting nervously and glancing around in vain for a sympathetic adult to take their place. The first victim is always the youngest, sent forward to recite a verse or sing a line, trembling like a leaf in a December gale. It doesn't matter how loudly you whispered the words to yourself before bed all week, or how many times you practiced in front of the mirror. The moment you face a sea of expectant relatives, your brain empties out like last year's fruitcake tin. The familiar lines of The Night Before Christmas dissolve into a muddle of stockings, chimneys, and flying reindeer, each word cheered or corrected by a chorus of enthusiastic, if unhelpful, family members. Next comes the parade of slightly older siblings and cousins, each one shuffling forward with dread and false bravado. Some belt out carols, hitting every note with gusto, if not accuracy. Others attempt poems, from sentimental Victorian verses about snowflakes and hearth fires to the occasional, ill-advised attempt at Shakespeare. The family's response is always the same: uproarious applause for every effort, and equally uproarious teasing for every slip. It's tradition. Every missed rhyme, every accidental rhyme, and every awkward pause is immortalized and retold at family gatherings for years to come. But the tradition is not reserved for children alone. Adults who have ever boasted of their musical talent or dramatic flair are quickly volunteered by gleeful nieces and nephews. Suddenly, grown men are declaiming, once in Royal David City with all the enthusiasm of a man reading his own obituary, while grandmothers take a wobbly turn at God Rest Ye Merry, Gentlemen. The family dog, sensing his moment in the spotlight, usually joins in with a mournful howl, earning more applause than anyone else. As the evening rolls on, the performances grow more daring and more ridiculous. Siblings perform duets, making up half the words as they go. Someone tries to play the spoons, another attempts a tap dance on the rug. Laughter bounces off the parlor walls, the candles burn lower, and even the oldest members of the family are drawn into the fun, reciting limericks from memory or recounting tales of their own childhood recitals, which, if their stories are to be believed, were always flawless. Through it all, the humiliation is gentle, the teasing affectionate. Even the most mortifying mistakes become badges of honor. Remember when you rhymed Santa with banana? You called Donna dancer for the whole poem. These are the stories that endure, stitched into the fabric of Christmas for generations. No one escapes unscathed, but everyone leaves the stage grinning, breathless, and just a little bit more a part of the family than before. As the last lines are recited and the final note dies away, the family collapses into their chairs, cheeks flushed with laughter and a kind of relief. The parlor fills with a warm glow, not just from the firelight, but from the collective sense of having survived, together, another year of poetry, performance, and loving ridicule. And as you drift off to sleep later that night, you already know the story of your poetic misadventures will be making the rounds next Christmas, and probably for every Christmas to come. And so, as another Victorian Christmas draws to a close and the parlor grows quiet, let's take a deep, soothing breath and reflect. Tonight, you've survived exploding puddings, marathon ghost stories, suspiciously moist porridge, paper crowns that itch like judgment, and a Boxing Day snowball duel that probably left someone with a story for life. You've watched stockings fill with oranges, battled for the last wishbone, and somehow made it through a midnight service without face-planting into a pew. Let's be honest, the 1800s family Christmas was equal parts magic and mischief, a blend of relentless cold, relentless relatives, and relentless carbohydrates. Yet, through the icy drafts and questionable fruitcakes, families managed to create warmth. It wasn't the gifts or the goose that made Christmas memorable. It was the laughter, the chaos, and the simple, stubborn insistence on finding joy, even if that meant setting your dessert on fire just to see what would happen. So tonight, as you drift off in your comfortable, centrally heated home, maybe whisper a quiet thank you to those eccentric ancestors who paved the way, who endured flaming puddings, mysterious pickles, and the annual humiliation of reciting poetry in front of everyone you knew. They built these traditions not because life was easy, but because they needed reasons to gather, to hope, to find light in the dark. Remember, the world you live in now, soft beds, warm socks, microwaves that won't explode your dinner, was shaped by generations who found ways to make winter a little less grim and life a little more absurdly beautiful. Because history isn't just a list of miseries, it's proof that people, no matter how drafty the house or how strange the custom, are endlessly creative, stubbornly hopeful, and just a little bit ridiculous. So let your mind wander gently through the snow-covered past. knowing you made it through another holiday without a single flaming dessert. Sleep well and dream of simpler, sillier, and infinitely warmer Christmases to come.